Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. I got early access thanks to Blizzard, thank you so much, and I want to talk about delves and some of my first impressions for them. They start with the quest line leading you into the first delve where you meet up with Brand Bronzebeard and he kind of takes you through the whole process. This is, if you don't know, kind of an amalgamation of like Torghast, islands, some of the digs that you had in Aberystwyth in Season 2, and kind of melding all of these different things together. So you'll go up to a cave, there's sort of this like shutter wall, and then you choose to enter, and it actually is kind of seamless how you can walk through it. Then you get up with your partner, which is Brand Bronzebeard, but there's going to be others as well, and you can kind of choose which role that you want him to embody, whether it's a damage dealer or a healer. There's multiple different difficulty levels. I only saw 1 through 3 on the alpha at the moment, but I think at least some of the in-game like nodes or difficulty levels that it was talking about seemed like there was supposed to be 5, or that there might be 5 in the long term. But as you go into higher level difficulties, it increases mob HP, mob damage, kind of like Mythic Plus, and it also has some different affixes, kind of like Mythic Plus. Some of them are having like spores that'll chase after you if you aggro them. Others are like you need to run around with a candle, otherwise if you're in the darkness it'll like sap your max HP. And you dive into the delve with your companion and have specific objectives that you need to complete along the way, as well as a couple hidden treasures that you're able to pick up as well, depending on how you sort through them. And what I mean by that is I had a couple of treasures that I found which just ended up being power-ups in the game, although I think there's supposed to be some where you can unlock keys to get more loot out of the treasure room, which is what you're going to find at the end. So my experience in the third delve that I did was that there was extra treasure chests at the end that I couldn't find a key for. And in the process of looking for that key, I stumbled across some like goo on the ground, and I brought Bran over to it, and then he uncovered a power-up ability. So there's a lot of the power-up abilities that you feature at a Torghast. There's sort of a scaling system and affixes the way you'd see it in Mythic Plus, and it seems like there's potential for some like parkour and I don't know, like jump challenges, the way that we've seen them. A lot of times they remind me of Final Fantasy because you're able to jump from like platform to platform, and you're even getting a double jump power up in the second delve I did, which was more of like the fungal caverns throughout. So there's different ways that they could actually add some pretty interesting challenges throughout this whole process. What I really liked about it was that there was some decent frequency to mini bosses. And at least at the start, it seemed like you got a couple different power-ups pretty quickly. Overall, I think I came out of it with maybe 4 or 5 power-ups. And the delves weren't quite as long as I thought they were going to be, which isn't a negative, by the way. I was expecting them to take, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes or something like that. And a lot of times I was just taking my time as I walked through all of them. But I think that looking back, you could really just like speed run a lot of these, and there wasn't anything sort of stopping you from just like blasting through it as fast as you can, which some players might do, because the delves are also going to have an end of vault reward every week for doing weekly activity. That's going to be another of the like rows in your great vault. So what was really fun about it was kind of uncovering different power-ups in different ways. Getting double jump, for example, was really, really cool. I felt like some of them you could just stack and grab as many things as you could and blast it as fast as possible, which might be interesting if there was like a speedrunning version to it. But I also would be kind of curious if there were greater challenges available for testing, maybe a little bit earlier. But of course, it's still an alpha, because I think there's those moments where you want to make sure that it's not just round up everything, AoE it just dies, and that's about it. Having some of the power-ups being increased damage was really, really fun, and some of them were like pulsing extra AoE damage. Getting the double jumps were really cool. I'm kind of surprised they didn't bring back any class or spec specific power-ups, at least that I've seen thus far, because there were a few of them I really, really enjoyed from Torghast. One of them was like the Cathar stick, where if you take damage, your next Shadow or Pain like deals all that stored damage after like one enemy. Those things I think would be really, really insanely cool to be able to add into the equation. But overall, the format's been pretty interesting to be able to look at how you're exploring and sort of adventuring through different areas. There's little quests that you can pick up along the way, have you gather more things or make sure you're taking out a certain rare that's going to be out there in the dungeon on top of it. And so I'm really eager to see how they're going to sort of add into the equation. Also curious about how the keys are going to work, Because as I mentioned, in the treasure room, there's like one contained reward that you're going to be able to have access to for just completing it. But then there's a couple of others that are sort of shunted off to the side that you need special keys for. So I'm not sure if there's going to be a way to like tie that into Mythic Plus or tie that into raids so that you're earning keys from them to bring into the delve, and then there's an extra incentive to go into this delve at a high difficulty level, which will guarantee that there might be an epic chest as a reward, and then that's going to give you something. I don't know if it's going to be an alternative way to give you crests. I'm not sure if it's going to be gear upgrades, crafting materials, something like that. But what I really enjoyed about doing the Zandalari Warbringers in Mista Pandaria, since we just had the Pandemonium PTR release recently, was that they gave such rich rewards for doing like really hard world content, or even just like time-consuming world content if you like soloed it as a Blood DK. I remember it took forever. And I'd love to see delves sort of operate in that same role, where if you do it solo, you could still do these really hard difficulty things, but they might take a bit more time, but you're sufficiently rewarded with things that help you craft, things that help you make gold, things that help you gear up an alt, something along those lines. And that's kind of where my head is from the early testing, is that this game mode can be pretty fun. I'd love to see how they're going to expand upon some of the affixes, and this could honestly be a really good area for them to add some Kiss Curse type affixes, where maybe they're not going to be as many Torghast type power-ups available, but if you're dealing with some annoying mechanic or some annoying affix, you also have a reward that's going to be coupling with you at the end. For example, if you're killing some of these spores that might be trying to chase you down throughout the dungeon, then you're getting a power-up, and then you're getting a speed boost or something like that. If you're evading enough of them, and you're zipping across the entire dungeon and making it go faster. Or you're having an easier time killing off a specific boss fight because they might take extra damage from XYZ source. Those things I think would be really interesting. Even having some boss fights that kind of bring back more mechanics to be able to do, even if they're solo. I remember in the Jailer's Gauntlet, I think is what it was called, the very last version of Torghast we had at the end of Shadowlands, which not a lot of people did. There actually was some pretty cool boss fights that you would go through, and they didn't really try to mimic too many boss fights that we've had from like raid encounters, but that's a really big dream for me, is if they would replicate a few of those things, even using, I don't know, the Time Dragons or the Bronze Dragonflight or something like that, to justify having this boss or a fragment of the boss sort of spawning, and you have to complete a couple different mechanics, get yourself a vulnerability window, and then just kill off the boss from there. Some things like that I would be really interested to see for higher level difficulties, because you can only increase mob health and damage so much for so long. I didn't find any mobs that were hard casting a lot of spells or anything along those lines, but of course soloing it as a priest healer, which still does not have an interrupt, that's something in the back of my mind. I'm glad that there's not, but that is always something that I see get added to boss fights over time when you just don't have an interrupt, and so it makes it very difficult to play that sort of game mode. Some of the things I didn't like about the delve system, at least so far, keep in mind it's still really early, was that it kind of seemed like a walking simulator in a lot of instances. There wasn't too much that I was like shifting through or exploring. I did like having in Torghast some of the like just caches that you could just burst open to try to find rewards or power-ups or things along the way, so that as you're moving around, you're doing some kind of activity. Maybe it's my ADHD brain, I don't know. But having something to be doing as you're walking to the next area. There were a lot of times where I'm just killing off all the mobs and then just walking. Killing off all the mobs, then just walking. And it wasn't as engaging as, say, the Jailer's Gauntlet, where you were just constantly in a boss fight, in an encounter. And I know that they want to make sure the delves are going to be more about exploration and more about figuring these things out, but it did seem like there was something, I guess, a little bit missing. And again, this happens in alpha, but it did seem like there was something missing for how better can you explore. Okay, you're going down the tunnel about as far as the tunnel is going to be able to go, and then you're looking around and you look at your mini-map and you see treasures. I would definitely love to see something where you're able to open up extra cavern walls, besides just the treasure room at the end. I think it was the end of the second delve, the wall just kind of explodes, and then boom, there's the treasure room. But something to offer a little bit better of an exploration, even if it's going to be going down certain extra tunnels. Let's say if I was in the one with a candle and it was all dark, that I can get extra candles on hand or spend resources so that I can get extra candles and then go down an extra dark cavern and see if there's going to be anything there, or I have to chase after this rare, which was just abducting all the miners, and then I have to go down into this dark tunnel for a side quest that's not going to be mandatory for completing everything else that I'm doing. Some of those things I think would be really neat to sort of add into the equation. Also, just adding bosses into it that are doing more than just spewing garbage on the floor. I think that's been a mechanic we've seen over and over and over again, whether it's been raids or Mythic Plus. And I really wouldn't mind if they incorporated the companion, whether it's Magni or Sir Burgleton or something like that, in an interesting way where you could like direct where they move, and then you two are kind of completing a challenge, almost like Portal or something, where they have to stand there, you have to stand there, you have to coordinate how they're going to do mechanics. For higher level difficulty, for replayability purposes, those things I think would be really cool. And honestly, even just having some sort of time or a timer that you could set to be able to compare times with other people would be really interesting as well. Overall, I'm pretty hopeful about the delve system. I think that there is some really good room for it to grow and like further develop. I would just want to see and have an idea of like what their vision is going to be for how they're going to make it repeatable, how it's going to be desirable to get done. Honestly, I would love this as a system to make it easier to gear alts for the long term. If I don't have time to do a key, or I don't feel like playing with a key group or something like that, or pugging, I can just go in and go do a delve, challenge my alt, push it to its limits, and then actually get a pretty solid weekly reward out of it for my efforts. I think that would go really well, and that's probably one of my biggest hopes for that system. I had a really good time checking out the delves, and a huge thank you to Blizzard for giving us that early access so we could check it out with you guys as well. If you're enjoying the content or have any questions about the delve system, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and keep it here for more updates on the War Within Alpha.